there's an element of convincing, I suppose, but it's kind of, well, you've said to me how you want to look, and in essence, that's how I look right now. Like, you're saying to me, I want to look like you, and I'm saying to you, well, this is how we do it, is by building muscle. You know, I'm not huge by any stretch of the imagination. Like I said, you know, I don't look masculine in my physique, and if I'm not flexed, I just look toned, which is what most women want. They just want to look toned. So I think it's just, you know, saying, well, this is how I look, this is what I do, so if you do what I do, then you're gonna get to that place too. And yeah, I dare say the pieces fall into place then.
Kia ora friends, welcome back to the Vegan Body Coach podcast. As always, a pleasure to be here on the microphone with you. My name is Jackson Burton. I am the host of the podcast. Obviously, I'm a gym owner here in Auckland, New Zealand, and an online personal trainer and nutritionist, specifically focusing on vegans and vegetarians or anyone moving towards a plant-based lifestyle. So this podcast is all about bringing evidence-based information and rational discussions around health and fitness for vegans and vegetarians. So you're in for a good episode today, guys. I am joined by Hawys Davies from Barry in the UK in Wales, and she is the partner of a previous guest on the episode here, Morgan Lalandi Smith. Now, Hawys is herself a vegan coach, also known as That Vegan Bodybuilder on Instagram, and puts out a whole bunch of great information, specifically targeting people who want to build muscle and specifically targeting females. And that's what we dive into in this episode, all around what does it actually take for females to build muscle. We dive into some of the misconceptions about muscle gain, you know, what are the rates of gain that you can actually expect, and some of the issues around why it's such a struggle to get ladies to want to accept muscle gain or weight gain for that matter. We also dive into a little bit of discussion around the menstrual cycle, and specifically for people who are weight training. How does the menstrual cycle affect your training in the gym? Are there some points that you want to be training harder and training lighter? What does that practically look like when you are programming your training? So a great all-round episode for you ladies out there that want to optimize your physique and your muscle gain, but also for some of you lads out there who, you know, want to learn about some of the realities of what it takes to build muscle. This is a great episode for you as well. We did lose the first couple of minutes of the episode just because of some internet issues, but we're going to jump straight into this one. This is episode 25 with Hawys Davies. You are listening to the Vegan Body Coach podcast, all about optimizing your strength, fitness, and physique through a plant-focused diet. My name is Jackson Burton, and I'm a nutrition and training coach for vegans, the plant-centric, and plant-curious. I'm sitting down with athletes, experts, and influencers around the world to inspire you to create your best vegan body yet. I'd love to know a little bit more about sort of where that journey for veganism began and sort of, you know, how that whole thing sparked off for you, at what age, and sort of what started that sort of journey for you.
Yeah, sure. So I actually haven't been vegan for very long, maybe like 18 months, coming up to 2 years in September, I think.
Awesome.
And prior to that, I wasn't even vegetarian. I literally went straight from being a meat eater, eating dairy, eating eggs, straight to being vegan. And before that, I didn't really know what veganism was. Like, I thought it was this like weird hippie thing that kind of outcasts do, and so I didn't really understand how it worked, but I knew that I just felt a little bit uncomfortable about eating meat. Pork in particular, had like a real gripe about it. I was just like, this just isn't right. Like, we have to cook something so that it doesn't make us really unwell. Like, we shouldn't have to cook our food to not make us unwell. So Then I met Morgan, my partner, who you know and love, and he was vegan, and he was the one who introduced me to veganism. And even when I first met him, I thought, this guy is crazy. I'm not giving up meat and dairy. But within a few months, just having, I think, that exposure, having that person there, kind of I don't want to say teaching, but giving you an insight into actually what goes on in the meat industry, what goes on in dairy and egg industry, and that kind of was the turning point for me. really.
Yeah. So it was almost more of an understanding of what the realities are in terms of animal production or animal food productions, right?
Yeah, basically.
Yeah, that's amazing. I think it's really interesting when you hear of someone, getting into a relationship with someone and then kind of, having no desire to go that route, but then over time, just through, like you said, exposure and being around that person and talking about these things, it kind of rubs off, right? And I think if you are an open person naturally, then you're going to, be much more receptive to some of these different ways of looking at life and different ways of eating and a lifestyle. So that's super cool. Has it been a massive sort of, because that's a big thing to do, go from, nothing, completely omnivorous diet to completely vegan. Has that been a massive transition for you? How have you found that in terms of your lifestyle and how that's affected how you do life day to day?
I mean, it has and it hasn't. So, like I said, I was just eating meat before and I had no real understanding of how to do veganism. So actually when I met Morgan, it wasn't long till we moved in with each other. I think maybe 6 months after we met, COVID hit. So I moved in with him. So that kind of transition was made a lot easier by just having somebody literally with me every single day saying, right, this is a good thing to eat, this is not a good thing to eat, like this has honey in it, you can't have that. So it's been easier in a sense that I've had someone alongside me the whole time, and also obviously given the current circumstances, we've kind of had that sheltered life, I guess, like going out with friends for food, even going to the shops regularly to kind of buy stuff. Like I don't really have that chance anymore to kind of go off track, whereas I think if I was in a relationship with somebody different, or if we were going out regularly to eat, maybe I would have found it more difficult to kind of stick to it and kind of lay down the law in that sense. But it's, aside from kind of explaining things to other people, like getting my family on board, getting them to understand why I'm doing what I'm doing, and that I'm not just kind of standing on my soapbox, like preaching kind of like a phase or something, or a fad. It's not been as difficult as I thought it would have been. I think everyone always thinks like going vegan is going to kind of change your life and you're going to become some hippie who lives in the hills, but obviously it's not that. It's just you go into the store and you pick something different up off the shelf, basically. So yeah, that's basically it. That's as exciting as it's been for me. It's pretty. Yeah,
and that's as simplistic and as basic as it needs to be. It's literally just like I tell people all the time. If you like, for people who have never tried like a fully plant-based meal, it's like, hey, just when you go to the restaurant, choose the vegan option just one time. Just choose it. It's like, that's as simple as the decision needs to be.
Exactly.
You don't have to be. And I was the same. I had that kind of mindset of like, oh, I'm gonna become like, vegans are just these like hippies. They're like with the tie-dye clothes and they're like, in the park, like hugging trees and smoking dope or whatever. And it was just so interesting to see that it doesn't have to be that, and it's literally just a lifestyle choice. And
exactly.
And it doesn't have to be hard, but I guess a really good thing, because you had someone to kind of walk you through it, right? You had someone to kind of hold your hand and say, hey, yeah, this does have honey, let's not have that option. I think it's so important for people that are transitioning, and if they're going to do it cold turkey like you did, is having a support group around them. And if they don't have people within their circle, within their vicinity, then potentially jumping on a Facebook group or jumping on one of these like 30-day vegan challenge groups or whatever it may be, just that you've got that support network there and you've got people to go to ask questions and ask for help. But maybe for yourself, because you did have someone to kind of walk you through it, what do you think, maybe for someone who is transitioning, like what do you think are like some of the big things that you kind of learned that were surprising to you as you transition, in terms of like food choice and things like that someone who's transitioning needs to pay a bit more attention to?
I think the biggest thing and the thing that still gets me now is things that you don't expect to have animal products in. So the big one over here is like crisps, or I guess you guys would call it chips. I don't know whether you're chips or crisps.
Yeah, we got chips.
But chips, they have milk powder in them, and you're like, why has barbecue flavor got milk in it? Like, what's that about? So that's the biggest one, is you do have to read the fine print. And even like 18 months later, I still will pick something up and be like, how could this not be vegan? I'll take it home and I'll look at the back and be like, milk. What?
Yeah.
How have I missed that? How have I missed that?
Yeah.
This is like a vegetarian like curry in the vegetarian aisle. So why is it got milk in it? But I suppose that's the biggest one, is the stuff that you don't expect. But I don't know, what else would you need to look out for? I suppose you could go down the route of making sure that you are getting everything that you need still in your vegan diet, going down the supplement route, B12 and whatnot. So doing your research beforehand is a really big part. And again, it's not something that I had to do a lot of, because I had somebody there to essentially do it for me who already knew this stuff. So basically just said, take this supplement, that supplement, but do your research and have that reminder of why you're doing what you're doing. I think I tried vegetarianism before, just kind of like, oh, this sounds like fun, and obviously it didn't last very long, and I didn't have the support around me. Like, my parents were like, you're crazy, why would you do this? My partner before Morgan, he was an avid meat eater, so whenever I said, oh, I want to try the vegetarian option, he'd be like, why are you doing that? Let's just have steak. So I think remembering why you're doing it, especially if you don't have that support network, is a really, really big part of it, because it's your decision. It's got to take willpower, and it's going to take willpower from you. So you need to have a good reasoning behind it, or that willpower is just going to crumble. So yeah,
100%.
They're the kind of like top three.
Yeah, cool. No, that's great. Yeah, I 100% agree. Did you have any like major concerns like before you transitioned over? Like, I guess was there a certain date where you were like, okay, cool, now I'm going to do this veganism thing, and then you went cold turkey? Was there any like concerns before you decided to make that decision?
I think the classic one was, how am I going to build muscle on plant-based diet, which is what everybody's concerned about before they go vegan, especially if fitness is a big part of your life, which at the time it was for me, really big part. Wanted to build muscle. I just started a diet, actually, kind of a really extended dieting phase. So it's kind of like, how am I going to stay full? How am I going to get enough protein? How am I going to get all of these things through a plant-based diet? And again, I'm just going to throw it out there, Morgan was on hand to help.
Yeah, cool.
But people don't realise that actually all of this stuff is maybe even easier on a plant-based diet. Like, you, maybe not so much the protein, but definitely staying full, definitely feeling satiated, definitely kind of feeling better whilst you're dieting. I know that I felt better than on diets I'd done in the past, kind of my energy levels, how I felt kind of digestive wise. So all of those fears that I had, all of those concerns were very quickly gone, literally within a few weeks. So yeah.
Amazing. Yeah, that's cool. So I guess with you're already into training at that time and focused on bodybuilding at that time. Where did that whole journey begin for you? I mean, you're only 24 now, so where did you start in the sort of the fitness area, and how did that sort of develop over time?
Wow, this is like a way back when question. I started. Let's go all the way back. I started training when I was probably about 18, and I used the term training very loose. I was exercising because I wanted to lose weight, didn't really know what I was doing, kind of, group classes, an hour on the treadmill, that kind of thing. And I was kind of doing that on and off for a couple of years, and the weight was coming off, and then I kind of got to a point where that all stopped, and I just focused on kind of the food aspect, so worrying about my nutrition and making sure I was eating actually what turned out to be as little as possible after a while. So I ended up, when I was about 20, I ended up developing an eating disorder, just kind of from that I think, relationship that I had with food and relationship that I had with myself and my body image. And weight training then became a way out of that disorder, kind of accepting the growth in my body, getting bigger, putting on muscle, and knowing that what I was doing in the gym was actually contributing to my body and not kind of tearing it down anymore, which is what I'd been doing for most of my teenage years, really, was kind of tearing myself down. So, I think that kind of took me then up to about 22. That kind of like going in the gym, kind of moving heavy weights, all of that kind of lift heavy and eat loads, that kind of thing. And then again, I met Morgan, and that's when things kind of became a bit more streamlined. Started focusing more on actually bodybuilding, training with a little bit more structure, and just kind of gaining that knowledge base that I needed to kind of really push kind of my physique to the, I don't want to say the next level, that's really cliche, but going from somebody who just went to the gym now and again to somebody who would actually then in future compete.
Yeah, I kind of love that idea of, the switch in mindset from just basically, trying to eat as little as possible and provide your body with, and like you said, you're just tearing your body down, all of that process when you're, eating disorder and you're just giving yourself nothing, to actually contributing to your body. And I love that, because it's like it's a complete shift. It's a complete mindset shift, is how can I actually build up my body. And I guess that doesn't just happen by accident, right? So where was that kind of transition from I'm just going to eat as little as possible and try to get as small as possible to finding strength training and weight training, and that transition into contributing to your body? Like, how did that whole process go? Did you have help with that? Was that because you had someone in your life that was already doing bodybuilding and they encourage you? So how did that whole process go for you?
I mean, I think anybody who's been through an eating disorder knows how isolating it is when you're in that time. All you can think about is food, sleep, and exercise, and everything else just becomes a blur. You stop talking to your friends. I don't want to say your family hates you, but you're pushing them away, and you're doing things that they don't understand, and that causes a lot of friction, that causes a lot of arguments. So I think I'd kind of reached that point where I was so exhausted and so fed up with myself. It wasn't even that other people around me were kind of pushing me to get better or saying, we've had enough, it's now or never. I was just fed up of myself. I was fed up of feeling the way that I felt. And so not to paint it like a sad story, but it was something that I did myself. I didn't have any kind of counselling. I didn't even really open up to my family about what I was doing. I think I had maybe one or two friends who knew what was going on, but they didn't really understand it. So that turning point was just me saying, right, I've had enough. I can't live like this anymore. I'm 21 and I hate myself, and that's not right. That needs to change. I've got lots of years ahead of me, and I'm not going to waste them hating myself. So I just kind of pulled myself out of it as much as you can. Started eating more, just kind of building up over time, and it gets easier. The first few weeks and months is that kind of almost like a denial phase. You say, oh yeah, I'm committing to getting better, and you kind of dip your toe in, and you know that really that eating disorder still got a hold of you, but you're dipping your toe in nevertheless. And the better you start to feel in yourself, the more confident you feel, the more energy you have from that food, the clearer your mindset becomes to be able to deal with the stuff that you're dealing with. So I think it was maybe 6 months in the making before I really felt like I'd gotten out of that hole. And that was, I'd like to say I had lots of people around me who were like, yeah, go to the gym, build muscle. But it was just kind of, if anything, it was more like the Instagram community. So seeing people on Instagram and being like, right, okay, well, I want to look like this person looks great, this person looks strong, this person doesn't look like they cry into a bowl of cereal every night. So so let's go for that. And that was how that developed, that turning point for sure.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great point, is kind of the Instagram community does it. That is a real positive of that community, in the sense that there's, if you look at the physiques that people, I guess, desire to have or want to aspire to attain, and then look at what those people are doing, generally, if they're honest about it, it's going to be heavy lifting and progressive overload and all those kind of basics and fueling their body. I think there is a lot of people on Instagram that are posting the stuff that they're not really, that didn't really get them the physique they have, right? They're posting all these like crazy little swipe hit workouts and all these like crazy routines with these like wild and wacky exercises, because everything's just about variety and trying to do something new and fancy and flash. But in reality, that's not what built the physique they have. What built the physique they have is those basics done repeatedly over many, many months and years. So I guess for yourself, where did we know that your body transitioned massively, right? There was this change in physique. How long did that take to develop, and what do you think was the kind of underlying theme or training program or way of doing things that kind of developed into the physique you now have? Because that doesn't happen by accident. There's obviously a lot of thought and process that goes into that, and time. So was there anything specific you did that you think led to the physique you now have that has really benefited that, or was just, hey, doing the basics over time, or was it, hey, you met Morgan and he helped you along that journey as well, or how did that whole process go for you into developing the current physique you have?
I mean, I'll start from the position of I met Morgan and everything started to fall into place. But
everything changed with Morgan.
Yeah, everything changed. There's a running theme here. I met him and things changed. I promise I have my own life. He's not the influence of everything.
Yes.
But no, I think the biggest kind of like turning point in terms of meeting somebody who understood training, which is kind of the biggest thing here, is before that I'd had nobody in my life who could actually sit down and explain those basics to me. Like, I knew these buzzwords like progressive overload, heavy lifting, kind of like these words that get thrown around, but I didn't actually know what they meant. I thought progressive overload was just put more weight on the bar every week, and like that works for like a few weeks, and then when you get to like 130 kilos on your deadlift and you're like, this isn't going up very well, like this, there's got to be another way of doing this. So I think going from having somebody who could then explain what those basics meant, then having the actual structure in place. So structure was something that my training was really, really lacking. Before I met him, it was kind of going into the gym and just, like you said, really doing those swipe workouts, doing a little bit of whatever it was that I fancied. And again, it doesn't take very long for those initial, like that little burst that you get where you're like, oh, I'm seeing progress. That kind of teeters out very quickly. So having that structure was just huge. Planning my training, having actual training blocks, and then followed by deloads. I'd never deloaded before. I already understood kind of like energy balance, so that wasn't necessarily a big game changer. But then I think I had kind of like a first or like a second wave of gains after meeting him. It was quite difficult to tell because I was dieting, so most of what was happening was just body fat coming off.
Right.
But then once I'd finished dieting, I actually kind of had like a little bit of decent shape. I reckon there was a little bit of recomp going on there. And then I think if we take it then to September last year, which is when Morgan started working with N1 training. I don't know if you've heard of N1. And their kind of knowledge base was so much bigger than what either of us had encountered before, in terms of kind of periodizing training, using different training stimuluses or stimuli, kind of get the best out of your training and train in more ways than just kind of hypertrophy, which is what I'd focused on previously, was just always kind of that mid-range reps, progressive overload in different forms, but generally just muscle building. And now we do kind of metabolic work, neurological work, hypertrophy work, kind of layered on top of each other. And that has been the the really biggest, like, I've looked at my physique change from September last year to where are we now in March, and even the change in those 6 months, I've been like, I don't believe this is me.
Wow.
It's kind of surpassed what I would have hoped that I would have ever kind of gotten to. So I think the biggest thing is just gaining more and more knowledge, and obviously applying it, and then just seeing what the outcome is, because I think you can get very, very far with just progressive overload and energy balance in whichever way you want to balance it. But I think if you really want to get to the kind of those higher levels, you need to be prepared to look at the details. So look at the really small minutiae that a lot of people say when you first start out, you don't need to worry about them. And that's true. There's no point worrying about like supplements for your sleep if you're on your phone till 2 a.m. Like the supplements are not going to cancel that out. You've really got to take care of the basics. But I think once you have got that solid structure down, you have got that base down, and you can kind of grow into then those other aspects, those aspects that are really going to fine tune your physique and your results.
Totally. Mm-hmm. A common theme with a lot of ladies that I speak to is this fear of huge amounts of muscle gain. And so for you, I think it's more the opposite. You're trying to gain a lot of muscle mass because you're in vegan bodybuilding, or you're in bodybuilding per se, which is all about bigger size and more, I guess, definition and shape and symmetry and things like this. But what do you think is the underlying reason that so many ladies fear muscle gain initially when they step into the gym?
I think, this I guess relates to where I started. I think we're told that as women we should want to be small, and small is the goal. Smaller the better. Like if you're over 5'4", well, like you might as well discount yourself. No, you want to be small. You want to be petite. You want to be cute. That's another big one, is being cute, being polite. All of that kind of stuff. And I think moving away from that, even if you feel in yourself, in your heart, that that's not what you want to do, having the bravery to actually move away from that is really big. It's really scary, because we grow up believing that other people or male men's opinions of ourselves are more important than our own. So you see lots of men who are like, oh, you look like a man. Like, I don't know how many times I said that. I don't look like a man. Like, what are you talking about? But for a lot of women, I think that is such a fear, being called out as ugly, being called out as masculine, being called out as undesirable or unattractive, that actually taking the steps to build muscle, taking the steps to get stronger is terrifying. And it's like, why would I do that to myself when I could just spend some time on the treadmill and worry about fitting into a size 4? Like,
that's right.
So I think that's definitely the biggest obstacle that women face, is actually moving away from other people's opinions and what you're taught kind of from a very young age. Yeah.
I was talking about this with a friend recently, and I think so much of it comes back to a male, what has predominantly been a male dominant world throughout human history, and these ideals around what is desirable. And I think a lot of the time when you get a male who says, oh, you look like a man, or don't get too big, or whatever, it's all coming back to just their own insecurities about their own self and their own masculinity. Because if they see some other lady who's got more muscle than them or looks stronger than them, then that's degrading their own place in society as this like typical and traditional strong male, tribal warrior type kind of view of what a man is supposed to be. So I think as we progress throughout, humanity as a whole, and as we develop our different beliefs and moralities and change those over time and evolve, I'm enjoying seeing the progression of like the feminist movement and all these types of things that are coming into play to shift the viewpoint of what it means to be a female, and that if you look like a man, is that a bad thing? Like, why is that a bad, like, should that be classed as a bad thing, right? So And I just know there's so many benefits for ladies when they start to build muscle, right? And they're empowered by the weight training. And it's a common theme over many of the podcasts I've done with the other females that I've had on the podcast, is that they start weight training and everything changes for them, right? They feel empowered. They find this new self-worth, this identity, and it's all a positive progression. But I guess, how would you, as a coach now yourself, help other ladies to kind of overcome that fear of muscle gain?
That's a good question, actually. So, I mean, I suppose the honest truth is that most of the women, let's say 80% of the women, by the time they come to me, by the time they've reached out to me, they've already decided themselves that that's what they want to do. You know, they don't come on board and then they're kind of surprised, like, oh, I'm actually going to be building muscle and getting strong. Like they know what they're getting into. But there are a few women that I've worked with who have been hesitant to start weight training. And again, it's come down to not understanding the benefits, not understanding how empowering is the word that I always forget. I'm glad that you said it, because I always forget to say it. But not understanding how empowering it is, not understanding how much is going to benefit their health as well. Most of my clients kind of come to me, or these women in particular that I'm talking about now, they come to me wanting to lose fat. And obviously one of the best ways to lose fat is to start weight training. And one of the best ways to kind of regain your shape or change your body shape is to start weight training. So I think it comes down to, I mean, there's an element of convincing, I suppose, but it's kind of, well, you've said to me how you want to look, and it's, in essence, that's how I look right now. Like, you're saying to me, I want to look like you, and I'm saying to you, well, this is how we do it, is by building muscle. You know, I'm not huge by any stretch of the imagination. Like I said, I don't look masculine in my physique, and if I'm not flexed, I just look toned, which is what most women want. They just want to look toned. True. So I think it's just, saying, well, this is how I look, this is what I do. So if you do what I do, then you're going to get to that place too. And I dare say the pieces fall into place then. So
that's great. That's great. I love that point about, when you're not flexed. I think so much of what we see of physiques is flexed physiques, right? So we start to think that that's the norm and what people walk around like. But you see like a super jacked person flexed, and then you see them walking around. It's like, have you like lost muscle, or like what's going on there? But it's literally just the massive change in how someone looks when they just are naturally just walking around doing normal life. And I think that's, like you said, that's the physique most people are striving for, is kind of that just toned athletic physique, which actually means, hey, look, we need to really get in the gym and crush it, because if you want to look like that, then we need to really put in some effort.
Definitely. I think people underestimate how much work you have to put in just to look kind of what most people consider like average in terms of fitness. Like you look at the top liars, like the top dogs, and that's like your whole life is going to be training. Like, but what you're aspiring to be, that kind of like fit tonedness, you still have to put a lot of work in. Like there's still going to be lots of hours, there's still going to be lots of sacrifices and commitment. So
I think that brings up an interesting point, that because a lot of what we do see is those top outliers, right? The ones that are got the huge followings. We see them because they are outliers, and I've discussed this before. So it means that a lot of the time the perception of what people do want to achieve is actually far unattainable for them in terms of their genetic potential, right? So it's kind of like, okay, so we're seeing all these incredible physiques. Let's try and bring things back, rein a little bit, and set yourself some realistic expectations for yourself. But that also means you're probably going to have to train harder than, like you said, you probably have to train harder than you think you're going to have to train to get there, and put in a lot of effort. But I guess because the standard is so high now, they feel like they don't have to put in as much effort to get that physique, just because that's what you're seeing all the time, right? It's just in your face all the time. So, I guess one of the downsides of social media, if we were back in, say, the 50s or something like that, or even the 80s, and all you saw was the people around you, right? And so if you were somewhat developed and you've been in the gym, then you're going to be like the most jacked person in your community, right?
Yeah,
but now
for sure.
that most jacked person in the community is going to be at like a very average level in terms of the overall world that we can now have access to via social media. So it's a really interesting discussion when you chat with potential clients about their expectations, about what they want to achieve. Which kind of brings me on to asking you this question of, and recently you posted about this on your Instagram about the realistic possible gain for muscle mass for a female, and kind of understanding what is actually possible.
Yeah.
And, a lot of that's going to come down to, I guess, genetic potential again. But, do you want to run through just some of the basics of what ladies can actually expect to gain in terms of muscle mass?
I mean, I feel like I should pull up my post now off the top of my head.
Oh, the numbers, the numbers are tricky.
Yeah, I mean, like if I pull this off, but I won't read off it, I promise. But let's pull that up. So, I mean, I think the biggest kind of takeaway for me from this, I've got it in front of me now. The biggest kind of takeaway was you can expect to gain X amount of muscle, providing that everything that you're doing is optimal. And I think that's where a lot of people misread this type of information. Like you put this type of information out here and it says, for a 100-pound woman, generally, they're looking to gain about 0.5 pound to 0.7 pound of muscle in a week, is it? I can't even remember my own numbers, crikey.
Yeah. It might be it might be monthly based.
It might be monthly, but anyway, it's not a huge amount of muscle realistically.
Yeah.
You're looking at maybe 11 pounds in your first year of gaining, and that's 11 pounds providing that everything that you've done is really at the top level. Like, you've hit all your macros most of the time, your sleep is perfect, your training's perfect, you're periodizing your training, you're managing your fatigue properly, you don't have any injuries, you don't have any illness. This is really like everything has to be in line. So I think you kind of have to put a buffer in for that. There's going to be several months where what you're actually doing is just laying the foundations. You're learning how to train properly. So you're learning how to actually recruit your muscle fibers in an efficient manner. You're learning how to perform movements. You're learning movement patterns. And a lot of that is kind of happening in your brain. And it's kind of out of your control. It's like when you're learning a language, you don't pick it up instantly. It takes you several months of learning and going back to the same thing over and over again before those things start to stick. And it's once those things start to stick that you can go from saying like I live in Wales to forming a fully fledged sentence and being able to then go on to write a novel. So I guess your 11 pounds of muscle is you being able to write your first article. But before that you are literally just laying the foundation. So I think it kind of tying into what you said actually with setting realistic expectations is, you can expect to gain a fair amount of muscle as a woman. You're not necessarily at a disadvantage because you are female. I think it's proportionally men and women gain the same amount of muscle, but men are just bigger to start off with, so they gain more and it's more visual. You can see it more. But you're always going to need that buffer period, like to actually set yourself up for that future gain, potentially the future gain, I guess.
Yeah, totally. There's always like this massive learning curve, and quite often during that period, there's not a whole heap going on. Like, you really you learn the basics of movement patterns and learn how to load a barbell and all these kind of really basic stuff that becomes second nature. But then, once you've kind of got all those foundations in place, like you said, you can start to move into like the real kind of golden zone of muscle building. And that's when, like you said, if everything is, you got all your ducks in a row and you line them up and everything's ticked off, you're going to be able to gain a significant amount of muscle mass. And like you mentioned with females, the other thing is it just doesn't show up as much, right? There's probably a significant muscle gain, but because generally there's a higher fat percentage on a female in general, so the amount of muscle that is built doesn't always show through as much as say on a leaner male physique. So that can quite often play with people's minds, I think, as well, and they feel like they may not be gaining as much as they actually are. But there's the data there, and like you've done on that post, people can go check that out and work out their numbers of what's theoretically possible as a bit of a guide for them. But then also knowing that is, it does diminish over time as well, right? The longer that you go into training, the less muscle mass is actually possible. And so, for yourself, how long have you been training now?
I'd say training well for probably about 18 months. So I'm still pretty early. Like I feel, I don't want to say I feel glad that I had that buffer of like training like absolute bunk for a year, but it's kind of, now I'm ready for it. I had that time, so I can actually get into the good stuff, and I've still got a few years ahead of me. But I think according to that post, after kind of 5 years, that's when things really start to slow down, but they don't stop, there's still worth. And I think one thing that I've noticed actually amongst bodybuilders, and especially kind of older bodybuilders, so more mature bodybuilders, people who have been training for 20, 30 years, is you could probably weigh the same, but there's kind of this maturity within the muscle that you maybe don't see in younger athletes. So I don't want to say it's like a wateriness. That's definitely not the right word, but you look at somebody who's been training for 50 years and you look at the way that their body is mapped out, and there's just something about it that you don't see in young athletes, which makes me think, well, it's definitely worth it. It's definitely worth training for 50 years, even if by the time I'm 30, which is in 5 years' time, things are going to slow down, but they're still going to keep getting better in some measure. So, yeah.
Totally. Yeah, I think you go through phases, right? And, for my initial years of training, it was relatively average training, reading muscle magazines and following those programs and doing all that kind of thing, and probably dieting too much. And then now, like as a 31-year-old with a lot more knowledge behind me, I can go through phases of training now where I actually really progress well, and I'm like, wow, how I've been training for 10 years at this stage, but at 31 I can get a whole bunch of progression just because of understanding the foundations a little better, and understanding some of the more the nuances of periodization and structuring training phases with specific priorities. So it's definitely like things slow down, but they don't stop, and there's more ways than one to progress, that's for sure. In all different aspects. I guess I'd like to ask you if there's specific ways that you program for clients, and I'm assuming you work with a lot of female clients, probably not exclusively, but just probably who you attract. Is there specific like nuances that you apply to specific female athletes in terms of like programming, training around menstrual cycle, food choice around menstrual cycle, just because obviously that is not a factor that has to come into a male training program? Is that something you actually decide to shift around based on the different cycles?
I mean, to be honest, I kind of take it case by case. Like I have, like you said, most of my client base is women. I have a few men, a couple of them are kind of my age, roughly about 30. And then I have, I work with one gentleman who's I think in his 60s. So there's quite a broad range of people that I'm working with, people who, women and men who are in their 30s, 50s, 60s. So it is very much case by case. I have some clients who don't even menstruate at the moment, but still kind of experience those hormonal fluctuations. And so around that time, they know that they're getting cravings. They know that they're feeling, a little bit off, a little bit grouchy. And then I have some people who don't have any of those experiences at all. And I'm one of those people, like, aside from maybe getting a little bit grumpier around that time, it's not something that affects me. It's not something that I need to change. So I'm definitely sensitive to what these women need, within their own training programs. If somebody says to me, look, I had a really bad day, I overate by X amount of calories, but we know why, because we're tracking, when their period is due, when they're having their period. I've never gotten to a position where we've had to adjust their training based on their menstrual cycle. I'm quite a big fan of autoregulation, in that if you are really feeling that bad, I think I make it quite clear that I don't expect you to train through something that is very, very uncomfortable, and not uncomfortable in kind of like the training is hard uncomfortable. But if you are feeling that bad, then I'm not going to expect you to show up and try and give energy to something that you don't have energy for. And I think it's important to recognize, while most of my clients are lifestyle clients, you know, they're not aspiring bodybuilders. I think I've maybe one or two who want to compete. And so having those off days or those off weeks, it's okay. It's not the end of the world. And it's healthier for me as a coach, and healthier for our relationship, for me to just let it go and say, look, okay, this was a bad day, a bad session, and we move on. And it's my job to encourage them to move on and not blame themselves for something that is out of their control. You know, we're not prepping for a show. If you overeat on your calories, that's fine. You know, it's 1 week, it's 1 day, that's whatever right. It is. So in a very long-winded answer to your question, there's not anything that I've had to encounter where I've really had to change my methodology for. I know that lots of people do believe in it, periodizing, structuring your training so that you have perhaps lower volumes around that time of the month. Maybe having a few more calories if you feel that energy is low, or if you're feeling cravings, rather than kind of resisting it, just saying, okay, we'll have a little bit more. But yeah, it's not, so far, it's not something that I've necessarily had to adjust for.
Yeah, I agree. I think maybe for like specific athletes, who, we're potentially trying to do 1RMs or something like that, or specific performance athletes, where you could potentially like structure their training so that, and get really nitty gritty with it and structure it so that you are peaking for your competition or whatever in the, I believe it's the follicular phase, where you are, potentially going to be performing at a higher level and not having these other issues come into play. But I think at the same time, like, I personally don't structure anything like that into clients' programs, because I don't want them to, have that whole mindset of going in thinking I'm going to be weaker today. Definitely. Or I'm going to overeat today because it's this time of the month, it's this 2-week cycle, and then that's sabotaging their own progress. Whereas if I didn't program any of that and they didn't even think about it, and then went in and trained as normal, and it's like you said, it's individual dependent. Some people experience no symptoms, no differences. Other people have on the other end of the spectrum where they can't get out of bed or whatever the case may be. So I think if you're preemptively programming it into programs, you may be selling your client short, but at the same time being open to auto regulation, like you said, so that you can adjust for these things on the fly if someone is experiencing a massive shift in whatever their symptoms may be.
Yeah, definitely. I like what you said there about having that kind of bias, even if it is unconscious. If you're setting somebody up by saying, okay, well, we're going to take things easy this week because this is happening, well, that's a whole week of their training that they're taking easier than they needed to, potentially, and a week of their training that perhaps they could have given a lot more to. And, 1 week out of 4, I mean, I know that I said that it's not the end of the world, especially if you're a lifestyle client, but if you are aspiring to kind of be at those higher levels, well, 1 week out of 4, that's a quarter of the year, 25% of the year that you're taking easy when you potentially didn't need to. So, yeah, I would agree with you there.
Yeah, cool. I'd like to quickly cover your approach to training for physique outcomes for yourself. So as a female athlete, you're wanting to compete on stage, and you're wanting to compete, and competitively, I'm assuming, right? So we want to do well. So what are some of the ways that you structure your own training in terms of like exercise selection and things like that, that potentially a lifestyle client might not have to worry about? Is there any sort of specific exercises you focus on or areas you focus on a programming basis?
I think the biggest thing for me as a competitor versus maybe a lifestyle client is I if one of my clients says to me, I don't particularly like this movement, or perhaps, there may be someone who's a bit older, has, issues in their knees or issues in their shoulder, whatever, then they are well within their right to turn around and say, well, actually, I just don't want to train this body part. It's uncomfortable, or I don't want to train with this movement because I don't enjoy it. Whereas for me, it's just like, this is what I've got to do to get to where I want to be. Like, okay, I don't particularly enjoy doing squats, but I want to develop my quads. I really don't enjoy Bulgarian split squats, but they're a great way to develop my quads. So it's just a case of getting it done. So I think that there's maybe a luxury in being somebody who's just doing it for fun, that you can kind of maybe not totally cut out, but definitely reduce the areas of training that you're perhaps not a big fan of. Another thing that I've noticed, again, with kind of periodizing, I've tried with some lifestyle clients to kind of go into some neurological work, and they look at their program, they're like, can we just do what we did before? Like, I don't want to spend the time learning how to do this. I don't want to spend the time learning how to do like sets of 6 and using different tempos and stuff like that. I just want to stick to what I know. Whereas again, for me, it's a case of, well, I know that I want to be my best, so therefore I'm going to take the time to learn how to do this, and I'm going to take the time to make sure that I'm dedicating the mental energy that this requires to my training. A lot of people just want to turn up and get it done and go on with their day, whereas for me, it's like, this is the first part of my day. I get up, I train, and then the rest of the day can just get fucked, basically.
I love that.
So I think that's probably the two main things is, exercise selection, I think I've kind of covered that. I wouldn't say that there's necessarily any exercises that I select for myself that I wouldn't select for my clients. If anything, I almost kind of test run things on myself before I give them to clients, and be like, right, okay, well, this feels like a good movement that most people would be able to manage or would feel comfortable doing, and we go from that. And I think there's a beauty as well in being a coach and being somebody who's interested in progressing their own learning and learning about new movements, learning how to kind of tweak things based on kind of biasing certain muscles or biasing short and lengthened positions, whatever, that you then, as unbeknownst to your client, you put that into their training program, so they don't even know that what they're doing right now is actually really cool. Yeah. But you know that you've done that for them, and that they're going to get a really good result from it. Like they're completely unaware that putting a hammer curl in with maybe like an incline curl is like a really cool thing to do, because you're doing it short and lengthened, and they're just like, oh yeah, a hammer curl and an incline curl,
that's
cool.
Right.
So I think I like being my own guinea pig, and then passing that onto other people, whether they want to know more about it or whether they're just happy to have the training program in their pocket is completely down to them.
Yeah. I think that's the difference between when you're working with a one-on-one coach like yourself, or like with me, the programming it's intentionally written, right? There's not like the exercises aren't just thrown together for no reason. Like, they're in that order, they're in that sequence, they're in that rep range. Those are all like, someone has thought about that intricately, because that's the most appropriate either for the person or for their goal. As opposed to like if someone just grabs an online program, like any program or a program from a magazine or an Instagram post, whatever, it's often not programmed with that in mind. So I really like that. It's like, that exercise, the hammer curl is there and the incline curl is there for a specific reason, because I've thought about that. And if you want to ask me that and know the reason, then I've got an answer for you. And that's probably, is a decent sign of a really good coach, is if the client can ask them why something is put in the program like that, and they can give them a specific good reason as to why it's optimal. So I really like that. That's cool. I wanted to ask, like, with your current training, how does a week look like for you? I know are you training at home right now because COVID and things like that? So how does a week look like for you at the moment?
My week, I'll start with training at home, because training at home, where I remember when gyms first shut, I cried. Like, I cried a lot, like real tears. It was just like streaming down my face. I was sobbing. How am I going to live without the gym?
Wow.
And I was lucky in that I had some stuff already. I had like a couple of dumbbells, a little bit of a few plates and whatnot, and kind of made it my mission within those first few weeks accrue as much equipment as possible. And initially it was really difficult because everybody was doing exactly the same thing, kind of stockpiling. So I think I paid like 3-4 times the amount that I should have for like a weight training bench. But whatever, I don't regret it. And as the kind of that summer period, I mean, I guess for you guys, would it have been winter? I don't know, like in like June or in July, that's like winter. That's so crazy. So during that period, it was kind of, I don't want to say it was difficult, because it wasn't. I was very appreciative of what I had, but there were definitely kind of elements missing within that. You know, there was I was very limited in what I could do for kind of training like my quads. Like it was like I can do a Bulgarian split squat, I can do a front foot elevate split squat, or I can do a set of 30 front squats. So that's kind of as far as I can go with that. But we moved house not so long ago, and I managed to acquire a Smith machine.
Awesome.
Which, I've now got set up in my garage. I managed to get hold of a multi-gym as well, so that's kind of got some cables. So training at home the past few months has been excellent, and I have no intentions of actually going back to the gym. I think the time, the stress, I used to get very bad gym anxiety, not in the sense of like I was worried people were watching me, in the sense of like I'd get there and there'd be people using the stuff that I wanted to use, and so I always just felt like I was in a rush and couldn't really enjoy the session. But actually training at home now, obviously I don't have that problem. I get up, which is me going into what my week looks like. I wake up in the morning, probably about 6:30 a.m. I go out to my garage, I train, come back in, have a shower, whatever. I start my full-time job, which is in communications. So I work 2 jobs. That's kind of like my 9 to 5. After that, then I'll probably do some coaching work. So like some programming, if there's emails I need to catch up on, or like form checks or whatever. And that's kind of Monday to Friday. We've obviously now got the dog as well to look after. So, you know, walks in between that. We're lucky enough to live by the beach. So my lunchtime is normally quite a nice long walk by the beach. And then my weekends then are just dedicated to coaching, so check-ins, catching up on all of the stuff that I've kind of maybe not had time to do during the week. And I sleep quite a lot as well. So, you know, I'm always in bed by 9 p.m, so 6 a.m. starts are not too bad.
You have to get that sleep in, especially for your particular goals. And with that, you know, kind of schedule, it's a lot going on for you.
Oh yeah, definitely. I'm always ready for bed. Like there's never a time where I'm like, oh, I don't want to go. It's like, get me there now.
I think I think it's really interesting with the whole gym situation, because it does, I think for a lot of people like yourself and myself, it's initially there's a bit of a learning curve of training at home. Once you kind of figure out some alternative exercises, gather a little bit of equipment, you just get back into a routine, and you have these really specific goals that you're trying to attain. So you just do the work, and you start to really enjoy that process. And like you said, there's no sort of there's nothing hampering you from getting a really good session in at home, because you're not in this kind of public atmosphere. But then I think for a lot of other people and a lot of our gym members, it's kind of the opposite, where the gym is kind of their social ground, and they go there and they feel like this is their little space where they get away from family or get away from work. And, you know, it's not such a hassle if they have to change an exercise or move to, you know, do the session in a slightly different way because of the gym is busy or whatever, because they just happen to be there. So training at home then is the complete opposite. It's like, there's you change the whole relationship to your training. There's no longer the social aspect. You might be having to work out in front of your family, which is just awkward. There's it's just this whole change of mindset from like, this is my home where I relax, to now I'm going to have to try and get hyped up to do, you know, squats in my lounge, which definitely. For a lot of people just it's never going to happen, right? So no. But that's so interesting to hear that you actually you're keen to, you know, progress back into to continue on training at home as opposed to going back to a public facility. Yeah,
definitely. I mean, and like you said, like I have so many clients who have really suffered throughout this, and we've kind of had this like hokey pokey situation where like for a few months the gyms have opened and then they've closed again and then they've reopened. So they've I've got one client in mind in particular where she's unfortunately not really been able to complete a full training cycle in the gym since we started working together. There's always been this kind of like cut off where something's, you know, they've kind of shut. So I definitely think there's a lot of people who struggle because, like you said, they don't have that social aspect. They don't have that time, that space themselves, especially if you're living somewhere where there isn't much space. You know, lots of people live in flats, 1-bedroom apartments, whatnot. I know how lucky I am. I know that I'm so lucky to have a garage. Like, lots of people don't have that. So I think it will do everybody some good over here to actually have the gyms reopen again. Yeah, definitely, for sure. No doubt.
Is that on the cards shortly, or?
I think, the UK is 4 different countries. I don't know whether you know this. We've got England, Wales, Scotland and Ireland, or Northern Ireland. England is set for April. Wales, we don't have a date yet, and I'm not sure about Scotland and Northern Ireland, but most of my clients are in England, so they're gearing up for April. So yeah, cool. Fingers crossed. Things look like they're going that way.
Yeah. Oh, that's really exciting. And so I guess last question on the training aspect is, how does a general week go in terms of you structuring your split? Like, do you have a specific split you stick to, training different body parts, different days, or, how is that? How are you working around that at the moment?
So, I mean, it completely depends on what type of training I'm doing. So I've just come out of a hypertrophy block, and when I was doing that hypertrophy block, it was pretty standard in that I was doing a 4-day split, 2 days on, 1 day off, and that 4-day split was split into chest and triceps, quads and calves and abs, back and biceps, and then hamstrings and glutes. But now I've just gone into a metabolic phase, so doing some AMPK, incomplete rest. And the nature of kind of setting that up is it is just 2 days of half body, so there's no real structure to it. I'm just aiming to hit different body parts that are not really connected to each other, so that each part is getting kind of like its deserved rest. So I would say my kind of preference, if I had to pick, like, what would I give for somebody else in like an ideal scenario, would be that 4-day training split, doing check as I've just said, and doing those 2 days on, 1 day off, and yeah, that would always be my approach for somebody who's just starting out, is hit everything that you need to hit in the time that you need to hit it, and allow yourself enough rest in between that. Nice.
Yeah, that's really cool. So I guess I want to finish up with a couple of final questions and just see what you're up to for the remainder of 2021. What have you got on the cards? What are you planning in terms of your coaching? Is there anything big you're working towards in terms of your training for this year, seeing as things are beginning to hopefully open up for you guys a little later in the year?
So 2021, yeah. I mean, hopefully it'll be better than 2020.
Let's hope, yeah.
But what have we got planned? So me in particular, I would definitely like to keep growing my coaching business. Obviously, who doesn't? I've only been coaching for about a year, so not even that. I'd like to get to a point where kind of that business is sustaining itself. I'm not having to look for clients, we're getting referrals, etc., etc. So that's a really big part, is kind of driving that. So getting those testimonials out there, sharing my story, sharing my clients' stories. I have got, everyone's done it, but I've got a free guide in the works, just something to kind of like give to people who are maybe not sure how to get started, or like what they're missing within their training. So it's pretty basic, but I think that's what a lot of people need, is just having the basics written down in front of them by somebody that they trust. And obviously, your Instagram following does tend to trust you, you'd hope. So that's kind of coming in the next few weeks. Then I don't know whether I'm supposed to say this, but Morgan's got his headphones on, so I'll say it anyway. Yes. But so we're potentially looking at kind of merging together, not necessarily our 2 separate coaching brands, but maybe launching kind of a group coaching type of setup with the both of us. I think we've both got such different personalities and such different kind of approaches, that bringing it together and merging our personalities together and our audiences would be a really cool thing to do. So that's definitely on the cards for 2021.
Nice.
We've both got aspirations to compete in 2022. So I guess preparations for that are going to start this year. Probably start dieting around September, October time, maybe a little bit later than that. And I think the biggest thing is I want to finish my house. We've just moved house and I want to get that finished.
Yeah. So getting everything set up inside.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So they're kind of the 4 main goals.
Cool.
Also doing an accounting course as well, which is a little bit random, but yeah, that's on the cards for this year.
There's a lot going on for you.
Yeah. I'm busy.
Yeah,
that's why I need the sleep.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, well, I don't want to keep you too much longer because it's probably about bedtime for you right now, huh?
I mean, you're getting there, but...
Okay, we're almost there. So I guess final question for you I like to ask all of our guests is, what is one thing that you think people should, one eye-opening experience that people should have in their lifetime?
Oh, an eye-opening experience.
Yeah, what's one eye-opening experience that people should experience? And it's something that's completely from your perspective of what you think people should experience in their lifetime.
I think everybody should experience pushing themselves to their limit, and not in a negative way, but really finding something that makes them feel passionate and makes them feel happy and energized, and being able to pursue that and take it to the absolute extreme. Because I think the adrenaline that you get from knowing that you're waking up every day to do the thing that you love is just, it's unreal. And I'd never had that before I started bodybuilding. I'd kind of drifted throughout my whole life, like drifted through school, drifted through uni, and it wasn't until I found bodybuilding for me. It's obviously not going to be bodybuilding for everybody, but finding that thing that just you can pour your complete heart and soul into, and yeah, that is eye-opening, because you don't realize how much you've got to give until you find that thing that you want to give it to.
Yeah, no, that's so good. I love that. So to finish up here, I want to thank you for your time tonight, and for coming on and sharing your story, and hopefully inspiring some people along the way. And I want to give you the floor to plug away. Let the people know where they can find you, and know more about your coaching and all that kind of stuff.
I mean, I've never done a plug before, so this is going to be.
There you go.
Yeah, I know.
This is your sales pitch right up here.
Yeah, wish me luck. Yeah. So I operate mostly through Instagram. So if anybody is looking to find me, they will find me at _vegan_bodybuilder. You'll find all my posts, but in my bio, you will find my coaching link, so you can book a call with me via that. My DMs are always open if people have got any questions, people want to get to know me a little bit more. I'm in my stories quite a bit as well, so cool. You'll kind of see me through there. I want to say you can reach me on email, but Instagram is probably better. Also on Facebook, at the same address, That Vegan Bodybuilder. Work primarily with vegans, mix of males, females, vegans mostly, but also some non-vegans.
Cool.
So yeah, and who wouldn't want to work with me? As we've just established, I'm brilliant. So
absolutely, we've just sold your entire coaching business. You'll be having all the inquiries after this episode. Awesome. Thank you so much for coming on, and hey, go get some sleep, and we'll hopefully catch you another time, maybe in person next time, which would be super fun.
Yeah, that would be awesome. Yeah, thank you for having me. Really enjoyed this. So yeah, enjoy your day, as it's now going to be your daytime.
Absolutely. Yeah, we've got a whole day ahead.
Wicked.
Thanks, Hawys. So just to clarify a couple of those numbers for you ladies out there, we'll give you just some rough guidelines here. If you are 140 pound female, which is around 63 kilograms, you're likely to gain anywhere from 0.3 to 0.5 kilograms of muscle per month. Now that's for within your first year of training. So if you're brand new to training, and we mean like good training, so consistent sleep, consistent nutrition, an optimal environment for muscle gain, so generally a surplus from maintenance, and with a very good structured progressive overload plan, a small amount, 0.3 to 0.5 kilograms per month. But that adds up to a large amount of muscle mass in the first year, around about 5 kilograms in the first year. So this kind of alludes to that kind of newbie gains era, right? When you first start training, you start to gain a lot of muscle mass. It's very motivating. But as the years go on, there's diminishing returns from your efforts. So in the second year, it might be 3.2 kilograms. In the third year, 1.6 kilograms. Now, as we know, it's very hard to actually measure this accurately. We don't have very accurate methods of measuring body fat percentage and therefore muscle mass gain as well. So the best thing to do is just to monitor body weight over time, monitor your strength across multiple sets and exercises within the gym, and look at your physique progress over time to see if you're gaining muscle mass. You don't have to be aiming for this nitty gritty, I want to gain 1.6 kilograms of muscle mass this year. But just keep in mind that if you want to be consistently gaining muscle mass long term, it is about being consistent. It's about having that long term approach. It does take time. Like I've said in previous podcasts, it's like watching paint dry, but it's just a hell of a lot slower. So stick with the process, enjoy that journey, and look towards, gaining appreciable amount of muscle mass long term, which for females, as Hawys is noted, is you can look to gain around about 22 pounds, I believe she said, of muscle mass within your training career, which is, around about 9 to 10 kilograms of muscle mass. So that's a lot of muscle mass, and that can really change the look of a physique if that is what you want to do. So that's it, guys. Episode 25 is done. Be sure, if you enjoyed the episode, screenshot your phone right now, throw it up on Instagram, let us know where you're listening from and what you enjoyed about the episode. It's always great to see you guys enjoying the episodes as well. I'm going to sign out. We'll be back hopefully in a couple of weeks. I've got a few episodes lined up to come out with episode 26. It's going to be a goodie. But for now, guys, go lift up, go eat up, and more plants.